is happening, fellow fantasy GMs? I am JJ Wang. He is the bearded one, DJ Dub. And with our powers combined, we are the Fantasy Couriers.
Welcome to a very special episode of the Fantasy Couriers. JJ Wang, we are beginning some of our shows, something new this year. We are inviting some of the champions of our leagues. I mean, last week was our week because each of us were champions of some leagues, but this week we got some guys from two leagues. One of them I'm in, one of them we're both in. And the cool thing about both of these guys, I was thinking about it yesterday, both of these guys are in the only two drafts I do in person with humans in a room. That is a rarity today.
Yeah, you're the only one that I got the live auction with, the Fantasy Nerds. That's the only one that I do live anymore. So yeah, it's like a rare breed these days.
Yeah, in the day
COVID.
People are moving, or it's just easier to not go anywhere. It's just sort of how the world goes. But I didn't even realize it when I hit up both these guys. So we could mumbo jumbo on a little longer. Do you have anything before we begin, or are you ready for us to introduce our very special guest, JJ Wang?
Let's go at it.
Okay, you've heard us talk about our auction draft. So I'm going to first introduce, if you're looking at the screen, the guy with the beard. His name is Steve. He is part of our league called the Fantasy Nerds Auction Draft. The draft takes place actually kind of early for drafts. The first weekend in August at my place, we do a live auction draft. As I've always said during the show, if you've never done an auction draft, it is the greatest 3 hours because literally, unless you did what JJ Wang did last year, you're involved the entire time, and you don't have to wait for your turn to come as you're going in circles, or you doze off for a little bit. But yeah, who did you spend all your money on? I forget. Was it
It was Jalen Hurts, Travis Kelce, Bijan Robinson, and Nick.
Then an hour and a half of quiet.
Yes. So needless to say, my team didn't do very well.
You won one game. So
I won 2 games.
Oh, okay, two games. Yeah. So in this league, I came in second to Steve. So Steve, tell us a little bit about your team, how you got into football, your favorite fantasy player of all time. Tell the world, or fives of tens of people that are listening, all about yourself.
Yeah. So I got into fantasy football. College, I was kind of a late bloomer coming around to it. I got invited into a league that my roommates were in. I remember driving up to New York for a live draft. A buddy of mine, his dad owned a bar. First year out of the chute, I got picked number 1 overall. I remember coming into it, I was like, Peyton Manning throws a ton of touchdowns. I took him, Tiki Barber, Steve Smith, and I want to say it was Chad Johnson. They finished 1-1, 1-2 across the board that season. And I won the title in my first year, and I was hooked ever since then. I think they kicked me out the year after that, but I'm a fan of that franchise that plays in Washington. All-time favorite fantasy player. I was a big believer in Arian Foster coming out of Tennessee, and I won a couple leagues that first year that he came out, going out on him in the 3rd or 4th round. So, again, he's got a special place in my heart.
Wow. Arian Foster. Did you ever have any Arian Fosters? JJ Wang that would be right when you were starting, right?
Yeah, I was kind of around the year. I started around the Sean Alexander year. I've never really had a lot of Arian Foster. I was always scared of like the whole injury thing with him, but I'd be like, you can't deny his fantasy greatness. That run was 3 or 4 years. I mean, he was legitimate.
Yeah, who starts like Steve? You must be the luckiest human being on earth to start a fan. Did you do research, or is that just dumb luck to start with all 4 of those guys?
No, I showed up not 100% knowing how it was going to go. I was told there was going to be a big board, but everybody else had their draft sheets, and I was literally borrowing, just looking at names I knew off of a buddy's sheet, and I was like, wow, Tiki gets a lot of target and touch share, and it just happened that Steve Smith was off the hamstring injury, so he hung around for a while. Didn't know that, but backdoored into him.
Oh, good grief. Holy moly. But yep, he took me out in the championship. We battled throughout the year, so congratulations, and I'll send you money after we're done recording here. No, and I might even send you the whole amount. I was talking to JJ before. Steve sent me an email today saying, "Hey, the math doesn't add up." I was like, "Hey, I made $100 being commissioner somehow or another because I can't do math." So now we're going to use Eric. I met Eric for the first time in August. I've been talking about a league I joined. It's called Kickers Are People Too. Met Pastor Jacques, who was on the show during the Bold Prediction show in the league there. And Eric is the champ of this league, and if he holds up his hands, if you're ever looking at the video in this league, you get a championship ring, a trophy. There's a whole bunch of hullabaloo. We could go in for hours about what all goes on. There was a will that got turned during the league. They kept rookies when I came in. I wish that if it hadn't been for Brees Hall, I'd have been playing him in the championship game too, but his team caught fire during the league to walk away with the championship. So, Eric, introduce yourself. Tell about your team, how you got into football, favorite fantasy player of all time, anything you want to do. It's your moment.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. So I've been doing fantasy football for, I think, like 26 years now. It's a little longer than that. So we got in with the college buddies, obviously 26 years ago. And we started where the only way we can get stats was getting a USA Today paper. So, and the big thing with it is why we had to do that is because we do IDPs. And when I mean IDPs, we started 2 defensive tackles, 2 defensive ends, 2 outside linebackers, middle linebacker, 2 cornerbacks, 2 safeties. So that is one of the leagues I'm in. It's fantastic. We draft, I think, 40 people because of the number of defensive players that we start. And then afterwards, I joined a Jacques League when he invited me. I think it was about 7 years ago. I've been pretty much dominating that league since then. Won the last 2 years, finished 2nd, 3rd, 4th. It's a pretty easy league to do well in. Adam obviously is his first year being in the league. I think you finished 4th.
I finished 3rd. The 2 rookies finished 3rd and 4th as we learned the league.
Yeah, so some of the guys are just nonchalant in it. So obviously the big thing about that league is you always want to play Bill's team twice. Because Bill's team, he just doesn't really pay attention that much. So just a shout out to Buffalo Expectations. We love you. Just pay attention to your team a little more often.
Yeah, the guy he's talking about, Bill, it was not a super flex league, but his first 3 picks were quarterbacks. Needless to say. Luckily, Bill's a good dude, but yeah, it's and they're listening. So Eric is already dropping the smack for what's going to happen. We do the live draft the night before Labor Day in the fall, and it went on into tonight. I'm sitting at the end of the night, like I'm about ready to fall asleep. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't stay up this late. What's going on? We had a halftime show. We were throwing footballs out in the street. It's quite the experience. It might be something we have to talk about in the offseason when we're like, we got nothing to talk about what all went on at that draft. But he's already coming, throwing left hooks all the way through for that league. But guys, welcome to the show. This week, JJ and I'm just hosting through. JJ is the commentary. Eric and Steve are going to be going through studs and duds. And since Eric is quite the stud with back-to-back rings, he's going to give us our studs. And Steve, you're a stud, but we'll let you carry the duds for the week. So we'll go through there. We're going to go through as many as we can in the next little bit of time. Positions going through, we'll talk, they'll say why, and then we'll go from there. So let's rock and roll. Eric, give us your first stud. Who you got for us?
Well, for the other league that I'm in, so it's really quarterback heavy. So it's a keeper league. So I had kept Joe Burrow, but one of my backups that I did is I drafted Brock Purdy. So obviously, the issues with Joe Burrow this year, I had a really good back in Purdy, and Purdy pretty much just won me the league and that other league. So that was my first stud.
Yeah, well, that's probably the stud of the year. Well, I'm not going to say the stud of the year, but Purdy's a great example. I mean, I got lucky enough to pick Purdy up off the waivers in the Fantasy News auction league for $46. Saved my whole team. It's amazing. Yeah, Purdy's my guy. He's one of my favorite players.
Awesome.
Brock Purdy. How do you go from Mr. Irrelevant to, if it wasn't for a 4 interception game, MVP discussion and making less money than 75% of the Division I college football players on the NIL deal. Like that
I
poor
mean, it's
dude.
easy answer. It's easy answer. Just playing Kyle Shanahan's offense.
Yeah, I mean 4,280 yards, 31 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Stud of the year. People didn't think it was coming. Who thought coming in this year Brock Purdy would be that good? Where do you
Kyle
have him
Shanahan.
on your stud rank, Steve? There, what do you think of Brock Purdy going into this year? And is Christmas more what we're going to get, or are we going to see what comes out of the playoffs this year?
I got to be honest, I don't see any reason that he can't sustain the success that he's had this year. I mean, I think his ADP on Sleeper coming into this season was 25. If he hadn't sat out the last week, he would have finished number 5, but he finished number 6. And he set the franchise, record for passing yards in a season. And I don't really see a lot of those weapons, falling off next year, nor again anybody in the front office. I think he's primed for more success.
Okay, I mean, I think we're all in agreement. He's an easy stud of the year. Let's jump over to the other side. We'll go to a little sadness. Steve, give us your dud. Who dudded out this year? Who poo-pooed the fantasy community?
Well, the guy that I wanted to make, the leader of my team in what was going to be a super flex league, I decided that I was going to grab Trevor Lawrence early and then let the chips fall where they may. And for a guy who was rated, again, anywhere between 5th and 8th, he finished outside the QB1 ranks. He had a massive regression in pass yards, completion percentage, lost almost 20% of his touchdowns from year 2 to year 3 after picking up Calvin Ridley and having, Evan Engram into that offense for the second year. It was a massive letdown.
Yeah, this guy's a crap show right now. I mean, I was such a huge fan. I thought this guy was bust proof. I didn't think it was possible. I don't care if Urban Meyer was his coach. I don't care if I'm his coach. I thought this guy just looked like the real deal. And I mean, right now I'm wrong. But to be fair, everybody in the fantasy world was wrong because everybody thought this guy was going to be that guy, but totally not.
I got 2 shares of Trevor Lawrence, and neither of those teams made the playoffs this year in Superflex. Done.
Yeah, it's not happening.
Team had Trevor and Deshaun Watson. Let's talk about a stellar squad. It was, that was your league, JJ Wang, the one that your sister. Oh, yeah? Where do you fall on Sunshine there, Eric? What do you think?
Well, it's that kind of interesting because I actually saw a stat with Trevor Lawrence. It was a few weeks ago. It was like for the first, I don't know, like 40 games or whatever, he has pretty much the exact same stats as Daniel Jones. So everyone wants to, say Daniel Jones is a bust, but Trevor Lawrence has the exact same stats. So you can't prop up Lawrence if you're going to, downplay Jones. They're pretty much the exact same quarterback. And Jones, you can say, actually has a worse team.
Oh, yeah, I can agree with with that. I mean, Jones is bad, but I have a harder time believing Jones was a bust, considering that he did have that really one good season. I mean, I'll take that one good season last year over anything Trevor's done so far in his couple of years. But yeah, I mean that's an excellent stat right there. I didn't realize that. That makes perfect sense.
I mean, in 6 games, Daniel Jones only had 3,100 yards less than Trevor Lawrence. So what can you do? And he was terrible this year. So the big question is, if we're looking at a dud there, same thing but inverse from Brock Purdy, does Trevor Lawrence bounce back? What do we think of him moving forward? Because we are past the season. He's not playing any more football this year. Next year, what are your thoughts on him? Buy him cheap or avoid him like the plague?
Well, I'll say I'll avoid him. I mean, I'm probably going to stay away from him. My dynasty, what I got now in dynasty, I'll keep. But I don't know if I'll be acquiring him in redraft. Trying to buy him on the cheap. What's your thoughts, Steve?
I'm a glutton for punishment, and at the end of the day, I mean, he was 30 touchdowns last year. Again, 25 this year. The flashes are there. The things for me to want to lean into as far as a history is concerned. He went from 12 touchdowns passing in his first year to 25 to 21 this year. Again, consistency in the offense, consistency again with those players, still being a high draft pick. They're going to have to make a decision whether or not to pick up his 5th-year option next year So he's playing and auditioning for that next contract, that job, etc. So I like him coming in focused. Maybe I'd lean into him as my QB2 as opposed to banking the franchise on him as a QB1 in Superflex, but I'm still going to be interested in him.
Eric, would you rather have T-Law or Daniel Jones next year?
I don't know, honestly. The Daniel Jones has the running upside though, right?
Yeah.
So that is a big plus in most leagues. So, but and like I said, the upside for Lawrence, and he has more weapons.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, with Jones, you don't know if Barkley is going to be back.
Oh, he's toast.
Who's going to be the running back?
Yeah, it's like Daniel Jones. We were high on Daniel Jones preseason for that exact reason. Like we knew he wasn't going to throw for Peyton Manning type numbers, but we knew he had that running last year. He was rushing his brains out. So, but yeah, we'll see what happens there. But it's funny that comp we were talking about last night. Last night was the Kickers Are People 2 end of the year post game awards ceremony. It was quite a hilariousness, a fun night. So let's go to our next stud. Who you got for us, Eric?
So I went a little different route. So for running backs, obviously there's some well-known people. So you have McCaffrey, you have Kerwin Williams. So what I did is I picked someone who really helped me in the first week of the playoffs. So I picked James Cook. The reason I say that is because I was going against in our league we have the Dark Triad. 3 people that are. Some have some questionable trades. So I was going against the leader of the Dark Triad. We'll call him the Canadian. And he had, just stacked team. And I'm like, okay, I have my team. I should do pretty well. He ended up scoring, if you scored our league between 120, 130, you're doing pretty good. He scored 160. And that was with Zach Moss being injured in the first quarter. But I ended up having James Cook, who played Dallas, and he got 44 points for me that game. So I ended up scoring 180, won the first round, beat the Canadian, and I was good to go after that.
Yeah, I mean, I like James Cook. It's hard. The only downside is that he doesn't have the touchdown upside. I mean, Josh Allen steals a lot of it. I feel like he's way more boom or bust than I would like. Maybe a few more catches, but overall, I mean, I think he had over 1,200 yards. So he can do everything. I'd like a little more consistency out of it. But I mean, it's going to be hard to do with Josh Allen still running. But yeah, I love me some James Cook.
Wasn't he like the second or third? I was watching the game when they beat the Fins. Like, wasn't he like the second or third most total all-purpose yards in the league? I believe. So
for running back, yeah. So it was a crazy stat. It's surprising. That just goes to show you how, like, under maybe little utilized running backs are becoming. Maybe I mean it's obviously more of a passing game, but I mean running backs just seem to be used like how many. But you barely get like more than 2 100-yard rushers these days. So I mean you're lucky in a week.
So. And JJ was high on James Cook going in last year. That was one of his boys. Steve, what do you feel? Are you a James Cook guy? And where do you see him next year? Where would you draft him in the ranks of all the running backs? Because it's a fickle position. Running back's a hot mess. When I was trying to pick a running back last week when we did our season-long studs, it was tough because really it's CMC, Kyron Williams, and a bunch of guys up and down. You could rank them anywhere for about 10 people. Where are you at with Cook?
So I'm a believer in Cook. I drafted him in again the auction league. He was a guy that I liked coming into the year because I could essentially get him very cheap, and everybody's the right player for the right value from that perspective. I'm a really big believer in that. If you look at what the Bills are doing around him, they signed Damian Harris in the offseason coming over as the touchdown back from New England. They signed Latavius Murray. They've now signed Leonard Fournette. They don't want to commit to him around the goal line or from a punishment perspective. If you think about the old school thunder and lightning that we saw in Tampa so many years ago, or even Atlanta from that perspective, I really feel like he's got the opportunity to be that guy that's going to be, 15 to 18 touches a game. They want to see more of that in the past than necessarily on the ground, but he could be the next Austin Eckler in all honesty if he's catching 6 balls a game and, rushing 12 to 15 times. I like him. I'd say probably around running back 15, maybe as high as 10, but I wouldn't place him into that top 10 for next year.
So do you see? So I mean, Austin Eckler's like on the high side, but maybe like a James White is because James White was solid there for a few seasons. I don't make. I hope hopefully more better than a James White, but I feel like I mean, if he can do what James White did for those couple of years, I mean, I'd be happy.
Yeah, you're right. The touchdown upside comparison to Eckler is clearly not going to be there. I just think that the touch totals would be much more similar than what you saw with White, who was maybe 5 carries and 7 targets.
That's true.
Man, the James White comp is gonna make the Canadian from the Dark Triad very happy because he roots for the Dark team. So, oh man. Okay, let's bring these studs down to earth. Give us a dud, a running back dud, Steve.
Well, it's the same name that we were just talking about, and it's another guy that I was very much in on this year. It was Austin Eckler, and for all of the injury apologists out there, I dove into this hard coming into this conversation. His touch totals are almost identical to the past 2 years when he scored 20 touchdowns and 18 touchdowns. He was 12.7 rushes per game. He was 5.3 targets per game. That is only 1 touch off of each of the past 2 years. The fact that the efficiency drop off came the way that it was, and maybe it's a change in the offense with Kellen Moore. Maybe it's the cliff that he was going to hit for his career at age. But if you had him, he clearly let you down, and he was available for 14 games this year. He didn't miss 8. He didn't miss 9. He was active for 14 games this year. So it's the clearest dud there was at that position this year.
Oh, absolutely. I think 100% agree with that. I mean, you've seen the regression coming, but not to this extent. I mean, this was absolutely crazy. I mean, you take away all of his touchdowns. He was never a big rushing guy to begin with. So I mean, everything was coming from touchdowns and his catches. So when you take away all of his touchdowns, half his catches, you're like, you're pretty much screwed. And like you said, he had all the opportunity in the world. I mean, it's not like the running backs behind him stepped up and played well because they didn't. He just failed in literally every way possible, and it hurts. I love that guy.
I mean, what's interesting, Austin Eckler has never rushed for 1,000 yards. This year was literally his 3rd highest rushing yardage total of his career. And I think if I'm looking at it right here, his 4th highest receiving. So it goes with that old adage of you chasing touchdowns can be dangerous with a player like his talent was there, but wow.
But to be fair, I mean, if you have chased the touchdowns with Austin Eckler
last year,
the last 3 or 4 years, it has 100% paid off. But as a fantasy player, you've got to see that the cliff coming. I mean, he's getting really, really old, and it's been happening. It's just whether or not you want to risk for another year, or do you want to get out early? I mean, I can see both sides of that logic.
So, Eric, looking ahead, Eckler pretty much is a scat back, but Herbert was out for part of the year. They were down to essentially throwing to Keenan Allen. Could Eckler bounce back, or do you think he's toast?
I think he's toast. I think they were trying to do a comparison of like how fast he was running to compare to some of the other running backs. I think he maxed out at top of 15 miles an hour or something. When you have other people that are going like 20, 21 miles an hour, and there's no way he can compete. I think he's done.
Oh man, sorry, JJ Wang. We might have to have.
Okay.
I know you're a huge Eckler guy. You were owning that year when he got all those touchdowns, and last year.
I mean, I still like Eckler, but it's like this is fantasy. Everybody they come and go. You've got to accept that. I mean, people are starting to get that feeling with Derrick Henry as we start getting closer and closer. You got to see the end coming for that guy too. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No. Derrick Henry, I love you, brother. Okay, give us a receiver. Give us a receiver stud, Eric. Who we got?
Oh, this is an easy one, I thought. And so going to Detroit, I'm on St. Rob Brown. I mean, that guy is just a stud. So what do you have? 119 receptions, was it 1,400 yards somewhere around there? He was just in my other league, not the KAPT league. He just, pushed me to the playoffs or pushed me to the title. He was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If not for CD Lamb being the greatest receiver ever, I mean, Amon Ra would probably be my guy. I mean, this guy's crazy. I wasn't on him coming out of college, so I completely missed the boat. I had to go get him. I had to go get him later. Find a way to get him later. But yeah, this I think this guy's story is amazing. The question is it possible for him to jump into the top five, or is he more of just a consistent top 10?
I'm a St. Brown believer, and I that he was one of the guys we were discussing. He was my original Puka, but my problem was I jumped ship because I thought Jamison Williams was going to be too good. Oops. So I traded some dynasty shares, and I think Amon-Ra. The real question people got to decide next year is, I mean, we're looking at probably what Justin Jefferson at 1 based on talent. Although I'm a CD. I think Eric and I were talking about that last night. I like CD1 over Justin Jefferson. I think you were on the other side, weren't you, Eric? Were you?
Yeah, I think if you had Kirk Cousins for the full year, Justin Jefferson would have had more yards and possibly more receptions than CeeDee Lamb, because Minnesota's defense is not good.
So we're looking there. We're looking Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb. So probably Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, and then is it Chase without Higgins? Possibly.
I mean,
or is it Amon-Ra? Or where's Tyreek?
I mean, I think I might take Amon-Ra over Chase at this moment. I think Amon-Ra is a more consistent, safe wide receiver one.
Or what about Tyreek?
I might take Amon-Ra too.
After the playoff game, Tyreek's going to be drafted like 27th next year because that was just a terrible showing. So, Steve, what are your thoughts on Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Sun God?
I'm a huge fan, and I'm a believer and a buyer in consistency. I think a lot of the people that were really excited about him were looking at the fact that he's playing with Jared Goff. And while that may sound counterintuitive immediately, the best years of Robert Woods' career playing the position that he plays coming out of USC was exactly what Amon-Ra, it's the track that he followed. So Jared Goff connecting the dots to, again, Robert Woods, and then getting a guy who in all actuality is more talented, shiftier, creates more separation. Amon-Ra is here to stay. And we got to remember, he did this year with Laporta's emergence doing what he did. He's not doing this based solely on the fact that he's the only piece in that offense. They have 2 good backs that were both playable as well. He's not going anywhere.
Man, I love to hear that. I love the Sun God. Stellar player. The future is bright. All offseason we'll have to decide. I mean, I could be convinced to put Amon-Ra at like 3. But that's how much I love him. Like, I just love the consistency. What Steve said, the consistency really gets it there. So, Steve, dot us out at receiver.
Keep it in the NFC North. It's this age's Will Fuller, and his name is Christian Watson. He's either healthy or he's not. And when he is healthy, he's either producing or he's not. It's either 30 or it's literally 3. And the greatest availability in football is availability. And he's failing to be able to prove to do that. Again, I was looking it up. Sleeper had him ADP receiver 25 preseason. He finished 68. So if you drafted him as your fringe wide receiver 2, or that early wide receiver 3 flex play, he didn't even return you flex value.
JJ, I know you know where I stand on Christian Watson. We are on opposite sides of this coin. You are a Christian Watson lover. How much does this hurt, and have we convinced you?
Oh, I mean, it doesn't hurt. I mean, I understand the downfall of Christian Watson. I mean, honestly, I've actually come to like Jaden Reed more than Christian Watson in that offense because Jaden Reed's there all the time. But yeah, I mean, you can't trust what Christian Watson brings to the table right now. And even though I like the guy, I mean, I'm still a smart fantasy player. I mean, I might keep him here and there, but I'm not going to keep every share of him. I'll move away. I mean, I understand. You got to play, man.
I mean, he could be the fourth or fifth receiver on the team. I mean, Bo Melton the last couple weeks, Dontavian Wicks, the VA boy, coming in. I mean, there's Christian Watson. That's a big gaggle of just wide receiver 3s performing. Some of them, the wide receiver 1s are performing like wide receiver 4s. The wide receiver 4s are performing like wide receiver 2s. I don't even know what to think of these guys next year with Jordan Love.
He doesn't have to be spectacular. I mean, just playing good will get him to be like the number 1 receiver on that team because he's got that big playability. And Jordan Love is a hell of a player here, man. I mean, he surprised me a whole lot this year.
So, Eric, Christian Watson, he's in that gaggle of players. next year, are you thinking he does something? I love the Will Fuller comp, by the way. Great. He kicks quite a lot. But Christian Watson, are you avoiding him like the plagues, or are you going to get your cootie shot and take a plunge?
So I think I'm going to avoid until I see something different. I think I'm going to avoid the Green Bay Packers wide receivers, mainly because Love does throw to a variety of them. So you had mentioned you didn't even mention Romeo Dobbs, right? So
Yep.
he was the other pick from last year
Boy.
with Watson. So you have Dobbs, Reed, Wicks, Watson. Then you have Aaron Jones taking up targets. So I don't see him as being a volume guy like a St. Brown. So I think that he could possibly definitely be, someone probably to avoid.
Yeah, I mean, he's at best, if anybody likes him, anything, a flex, because he did have, a 94, a 91-yard game, a 71-yard game, and he still had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 touchdowns in the limited sample. So he's a high risk, maybe a reward kind of player. Not even a high reward at this point, maybe a reward. So let's
yeah.
Okay.
And to Steve's point, those games you mentioned were the only games he played, so he's Will Fuller.
This is great. Let's talk about the best position in football. My favorite of all time position in football. We're talking about the mighty, mighty tight end. In the summer, I wear my tight end U shirt with pride, and I am super excited because we're talking about one of my favorite guys coming up. So, Eric, give us a tight end stud.
So I'm going to switch up a little bit. So I'm going to I had one name there. I want to switch it to another name. So in our league that I won, the KAPT league, my lineup was solid, but I needed a tight end. So I went to the manager for the One Bit Wonders, and he had Kyle Pitts and Sam Laporta, and I wanted Sam Laporta because I had Sam Laporta in my other league. So I traded Sam for Sam Laporta.
I was so mad.
And Sam Laporta was just a stud this year. Fantastic tight end from Detroit. In my other league, I actually had 3 people from Detroit. I had Brown, Laporta, and Montgomery, and which is probably why I won the league. But Laporta was just an ultimate stud at tight end.
I remember how mad I was. I was like, how did you get him? You really added that. I think at that point, I thought, man, he might have just won the league again because I am Sam Laporta is one of my favorite new guys. I was not a Kincaid guy. I love the Laporta, but go Lions. What do you got, JJ?
Yeah, I mean, he had a great season. I mean, he kind of exceeded the expectations, of a tight end coming in that first year. And in that offense, I mean, Jared Goff just keeps, supplying targets to all these guys. And Sam Laporta had a fantastic season. I think with Amon-Ra taking the top off and having this focus so much attention, that it opens up a lot. And then by the end of the season, they were just opening everything up for each other. So I mean, I'm not scared about that offense at all. I think it just keeps rolling. I think all the same numbers just repeat next year. Maybe Sam Laporta definitely a little better than probably a lot better than what he did this year. But I'm not afraid of that taking away from the numbers of Alondra.
So, Steve, Sam Laporta, we've been having some discussions. We're looking at the future. How would you feel with Sam Laporta as tight end 1 next year?
I personally wouldn't draft him there, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he finished the year there because, again, you're just going to see it coming in waves one way or the other. I don't see another passing, target hog in that offense outside of Amon-Ra, and they're not running the same route trees. They're not running on top of one another in any way, shape, or form. If you're thinking about intermediate routes versus the deeper routes, what's working outside the hashes versus inside the hashes, he has his role carved out in that offense. Much like the way that TJ Hawkinson took another step this year, Laporta is primed to repeat what he's done because he's not going to compete for targets in that offense for what he brings to them.
Who would you have as tight end 1 next year, off the top of your head? Would it be Hawkinson?
I'd probably lean into Hawkinson. Hawkinson was tight end 1 until he missed the last 2 games, again, of this particular year. So, again, I think his role is just as safe.
The quarterback for that team will make it quite interesting, I think, next year. Hopefully it's Cousins. I like Cousins. He's a good dude, but I don't think.
Yeah, I think if Cousins comes back or they upgrade at quarterback, I think Hawkinson's safe. But I mean, that quarterback situation is really, really scary.
Steve, you have the easiest job in fantasy football. Pick a tight end dud.
Well, I was going to say, it sounds like we almost, tagged up on this beforehand, but what empowered your trade for Laporta, Eric, is the fact that people can't shake Kyle Pitts. And I'm a Florida fan, so I get it. Again, he couldn't hold off Jonnu Smith on that team, or Arthur Smith wouldn't, commit to him in that way. But he had 90 targets against Jonnu Smith's 70 this year. If you're not going to be able to rise to the top and really show yourself as a guy that has to get the ball and demand the ball in the offense, Bijan had his days. London had his days. They just can't get into and commit around Pitts. It's almost the opposite side of Watson. Watson gave everybody excitement around 7-8 tight ends in half a season his first year in. Pitts did it with the yards, but he doesn't find the end zone, and the volume just isn't as consistently, working his way to be able to make him the viable asset on talent that everybody wants him to be, continuing to project him as a top 5 tight end.
Oh, yeah. No, go ahead, Adam.
You do realize that this was the most touchdowns Kyle Pitts ever scored in his career, don't you? And he's a dud. Correct. You don't like the number 3? 3 isn't a great number for the second coming of Travis Kelce, or he's playing more like Aaron Hernandez right now, but too soon. Anyway, Steve's just shaking his head. So JJ Wang, what were you guys? What are your thoughts on some Kyle Pitts? Just
Kyle Pitts is that guy I just can't get rid of. I mean, I only ended up with one share of him, and I can't get rid of it. I know he sucks. I know he can't catch. I know he doesn't score touchdowns. But I mean, you can always find hope. And my hope is that Desmond Ritter's gone, Arthur Smith is gone. We bring in some positive.
So
Justin Fields.
Justin Fields will work. I mean, because look what Justin Fields, I mean, he provides well enough for Cole Kmet. I mean, it looks great. I just can't get rid of it. I mean, I know he's terrible, but I'm going to keep my last share, hoping that, just like I'm going to keep my last Trey Lance share, I'm going to keep it forever. Just in case, it might pop off for a game or two. I'll be there to celebrate it when it happens.
So Kyle Pitts is that one share of GameStop I didn't cash out on. That's really what it is right now. If I had cashed out on Kyle Pitts in his rookie year, I'd be okay. Now, I can't give Kyle Pitts away for Jonnu Smith. So that's sort of where we are. Where do you stand on Kyle Pitts, Eric? Future's bright, future's light, or nothing's ever going to come of this dude? He just looks good in a weight room.
I think it really depends on who the quarterback's going to be for that and who the coach is going to be. So their coach was horrible the last 2 years. So when Kyle Pitts had Matt Ryan, he was fine. So, but then you throw in, Marcus Mariota and then Riddler. Yeah, he was terrible because his quarterback was terrible.
Don't forget about Heineke. Doo-doo.
Yeah.
And that was Matt Ryan's terrible year, too. That's the best part of this. That was the year that Matt Ryan was a big old pile of poop, but Kyle Pitts did everything but score touchdowns, right?
Right.
Okay, guys. Touchdown, man. You all are stellars. Do you have any last words of wisdom for us? Because you are champs. We have champs. We have Steve would call me, and he had hours of expertise as we were getting ready for the show. I've got a 30-phone long thread on ideas for the show of studs and duds. He's a great. We might have to resource some college football stuff there after JJ Wang watches his tape. Getting to know Eric, good dude. He's talking smack in the league, so now I've got to focus a little more. He was looking at me crazy. I remember in the draft, I went wide receiver. He's like, dude, what are you doing? Keeping drafting receivers. If I'd have drafted the right receivers, my plan would have worked. That was my problem.
Isaiah Rodgers. That's what you drafted.
Had some problems.
Can I use my words of wisdom up for a question right now for the college expert, Steve? Yeah, sure. What's your thought on Bo Nix?
I loved him at Auburn as a guy who watched the SEC. Seeing the transition and seeing how successfully he made it at Oregon, to be able to plug into that offense and continue to do the things that he was doing at Auburn at an even higher level, in all honesty, with the talent around him. I'm intrigued by him coming into the league. But again, I'm a prototypical size guy. There's a reason I like Drake May over Caleb Williams, and we'll see if this comes back to haunt me. It's not because I think Caleb Williams is a bad quarterback, but I'm going to lean it into prototypical guys. He has a lot of starts, a lot of wins. He's seen a lot of ball. He comes from a football family. He's a guy that I would be interested in and intrigued by, depending on what his landing spot is.
I'm gonna have to take that into consideration because I think I'm kind of on the other end. Like you obviously watch more college. I wasn't really all that impressed with his college days. I didn't think he really did much. And then I feel like he goes to Oregon and then automatically transforms into, that typical Oregon style quarterback. Does that not scare you? The fact that all Oregon quarterbacks are like system, but when they come to the NFL, it's kind of different there.
How's Justin Herbert doing?
Joey Harrington?
Marcus Mariota?
Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert is the exception. I will give you that. But
he didn't do good this year.
The Auburn. This year was kind of sketchy. But yeah, I just wanted to get your thoughts. I was been kind of negative. I needed a different opinion on that. I appreciate it.
No, don't get me wrong. He's somewhere between Chase Daniel and Kyler Murray. How's that strike you?
Wow. It's somewhere.
I can see that. I mean, I can see that.
I feel safe with that continuum.
I'm on board with that.
Okay, so let's go. Eric, give us some words of wisdom so that people can impart your championship knowledge as they next year, maybe they want a ring. Or maybe you don't want them to get that ring so you can fill up those fingers like the Patriots.
Well, it really depends on your league and what this point values are. But the big thing is looking at the end of the year. So basically what I did is try to look at the matchups that each of the players had for the playoffs. So there was a time where we had obviously defense. I had like 4 defenses on my team towards the end of the year because I was trying to figure out which defense was being the best. And I ended up picking up Jacksonville for the last week of the season for the championship game because they were playing Carolina. So look at the matchups. Look at the matchups early. So I think that's the best way to try to win the league.
Okay, well, Steve, give us your championship wisdom.
I got to be honest. I'll say ditto on top of what Eric just said. Plotting it out, knowing who, what, when, and where. Scoring system matters a ton. But in crunch time, when you need to be winning those games, what do those matchups look like? If you're a James Conner owner, the last 5 weeks of this year, you were extremely, extremely happy when he didn't come out of the gates just as a Spitfire when he got injured. But once he got back healthy, he had the exact matchups to help you run the table if you still had him.
Shout out to James Conner, man.
He's a late season stud. That's for daggone sure. So, JJ, first off, thank you, Eric and Steve, for coming in and spending some time with us this week. JJ, you got any wisdom to depart as we move on? Next week's, by the way, if you're looking ahead, everybody, next week's show will be a little off because my weekend is all wonky because my son is Big Julie and Guys and Dolls, so he's got a big show on a big stage all weekend. I'm going to be tired. He's going to be tired. I don't know when we're recording, JJ Wang. We'll figure that out later.
Figure it out. Yeah, I'll leave it with this. I mean, it feels good to get different opinions from other guys other than DJ Dove here. I mean, even though DJ Dove is great, I mean, his opinion isn't always right. It feels good to get an outside source. That just goes for fantasy. Don't be afraid to get somebody else's opinion. What they say might change your mind a little bit. So as always, trust yourself and trust the process.